Welcome to Revenge with Lyra. They sat me at table 17. Alone. Not near family. Not near friends. Just me, a wobbling chair. And a centerpiece of wildflowers that kept shedding petals onto my empty plate like tiny apologies. My brother Derek's wedding had 237 guests. I counted them during the ceremony while I stood in the back behind a decorative column, because there wasn't a seat for me up front either. My mother walked right past me in her lavender dress and pretended she didn't see me. My father shook hands with strangers and called them family. And Derek, he looked right through me like I was made of the same glass as the champagne flutes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But here's what they didn't expect. A man I'd never met would slide into the chair beside me, lean close enough that I could smell cedar and coffee, and whisper 4 words that would flip my entire existence upside down. Act like you're with me. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 28 years old. And if you think this story is about a wedding, you're wrong. It's about the moment I stopped waiting for people to save me a seat and started building my own table. The invitation came 3 months before the wedding. Cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, the kind that costs $4 per piece. It was addressed to Miss Maya Chen. Not Maya Chen and guest. Just me. Singular. Alone. I opened it standing in my studio apartment in downtown Austin, the one with the AC unit that rattled like it had asthma and a kitchen so small I had to choose between opening the fridge or the oven, never both. The invitation announced the marriage of Derek Matthew Chen to Brittany and Morrison at some lakeside resort I'd never heard of but immediately knew I couldn't afford to match. There was an RSVP card. Chicken or fish. I almost laughed. They didn't even ask if I was coming. They just assumed I'd show up, smile and be grateful for the scraps. I should tell you how we got here. Derek is 4 years older than me, which in our family translated to 4,000 miles of favoritism. He went to law school. I went to art school. He bought a condo in West Lake Hills. I rented a studio that smelled like the taco truck downstairs. He worked part-time at our father's insurance company and pulled in 6 figures doing what he called consulting, which as far as I could tell meant playing golf with clients and nodding in meetings. I worked at Sunrise Brew making oat milk lattes for people who didn't say thank you. And at night I freelanced as a graphic designer for startups that paid in exposure and the occasional $50 Venmo. Our parents loved Derek the way sunlight loves a prism. He refracted everything they wanted to see. Success. Stability. Path they understood. I was the dust in the corner, visible only when inconvenient. During family dinners, my father would ask Derek about cases, about deals, about his future. He'd ask me if I was still making coffee. My mother collected photos of Derek like trophies. Derek at his law school graduation. Derek shaking hands with the judge. Derek and Brittany on some yacht I didn't know he had access to. The only photo she had of me was from high school, back when I still tried to fit into their frame. When Derek got engaged, the family group chat exploded. My mother sent 17 messages in 4 minutes. All caps. Exclamation points like confetti. My father called it the best news he'd heard all year. And this was a man who just gotten a clean bill of health from his cardiologist, so that should tell you something. I sent a simple congratulations with a heart emoji. No one responded. 2 days later, my mother called and asked if I'd be willing to help with wedding planning. For a second I thought maybe this was it. Maybe I was being pulled into the inner circle. Then she clarified. She wanted me to design the invitations. For free. As my gift to them. I said yes because I didn't know how to say no to people who'd spent my whole life teaching me I wasn't worth hearing. I spent 40 hours on those invitations. Custom illustrations of the lake, the barn, little wildflowers along the borders. I sent my mother 3 rounds of revisions. She responded to none of them with a compliment, only corrections. The font was too whimsical. The colors were too bold. Could I make it more elegant, more timeless, more like something Brittany would actually want to keep? When the final version went to print, my mother sent a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No thank you. No acknowledgement. When the invitations arrived, Brittany posted one on Instagram with the caption, "Absolutely in love with how these turned out. Cannot wait to celebrate." She tagged the printing company. Not me. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was used to it. But using a knife every day doesn't mean it stops cutting. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a masterclass in exclusion. There were dress fittings I wasn't invited to, a bridal shower where I saw the photos on my mother's Facebook before anyone told me it happened, a bachelor and bachelorette weekend in New Orleans that I only knew about because Derek posted a photo with the caption, "Last ride with the crew." I wasn't crew. I wasn't even cargo. My best friend Sophie told me not to go to the wedding. We were sitting in her kitchen, and she was watching me try not to cry into my mug of chamomile tea. She said, "Maya, why are you doing this to yourself? These people don't celebrate you. Why celebrate them?" I didn't have a good answer. Maybe I thought if I showed up, if I smiled enough, wore the right dress, stayed quiet and acceptable, they'd finally see me as something other than an obligation. Maybe I just didn't want to admit that my own family would rather I disappear. So I went. I bought a dress from a thrift store in East Austin. A simple navy blue thing that fit well enough and didn't make me look like I was trying too hard or too little. I drove out to Lake Travis on a Saturday morning in May with the windows down and a knot in my stomach that tightened with every mile. The resort was stunning. All stone and wood and glass that reflected the water like a postcard. There were white tents, string lights already glowing even though it was barely noon, and everywhere I looked there were people hugging, laughing, taking photos like they were already practicing for the reception. I walked to the check-in table, where a young woman with a clipboard and a smile made of customer service looked up at me. "Name? Maya Chen." She scanned the list, flipped a page, scanned again. Her smile thinned. "Oh, you're at table 17. She said it like she was announcing a cancer diagnosis. I felt my face go hot. "Where is that?" She pointed vaguely toward the back of the reception barn, near the kitchen doors. I nodded and walked away before she could see my eyes start to sting. The ceremony was outside by the lake. Rows of white chairs tied with burlap ribbons faced an arch wrapped in ivy and roses. I got there early, hoping maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was a seat reserved somewhere decent. But the first 3 rows had little signs. "Reserved for family." I stood there staring at those signs like they were written in a language I'd forgotten how to read. My own brother's wedding, and I wasn't family enough for the front row. I wasn't family enough for any row. I ended up standing in the back, partially hidden behind a decorative column wrapped in lights. I watched my parents walk down the aisle, arm in arm, waving at people like they were royalty. I watched Brittany's family fill the rows, all of them color-coordinated and beaming. I watched the bridesmaids glide down in their blush pink dresses, and the groomsmen swagger in their gray suits. And then Brittany appeared, and everyone stood. She looked beautiful, I'll give her that. Her dress was simple and expensive, the kind of expensive that doesn't need to announce itself. My brother cried when he saw her. Actual tears. I wondered if he'd ever cried for me. The officiant talked about love and family and the joining of 2 souls. He mentioned how Derek and Brittany were surrounded by the people who mattered most. I looked around at the 237 guests and realized I didn't know most of them. Colleagues. Brittany's sorority sisters. My father's business partners. Strangers who got better seats than me. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," everyone erupted into applause. I clapped too because what else do you do when you're invisible? The reception barn was even worse. Long wooden tables under exposed beams and more string lights than stars. A DJ was setting up in the corner. There was a photo booth, a dessert table the size of my apartment, and centerpieces that probably cost more than my rent. I found table 17 tucked near the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a server pushed through, the door smacked the back of my chair. There were 8 chairs at the table. 7 were empty. Just me and the wildflowers, which were already starting to wilt in the heat. I sat down and looked at the little place card. Maya Chen, written in the same gold calligraphy as all the others, like that made it equal. I watched families gather at other tables, friends pouring wine and hugging, kids running around with sparklers even though it wasn't dark yet. My parents were at table 1 with Brittany's parents, toasting with champagne that caught the light. Derek and Brittany had a sweetheart table at the front. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Just the 2 of them, backs to the crowd like they were posing for a painting. I pulled out my phone and pretended to be busy. Scrolled through nothing. Liked photos I didn't care about. Anything to avoid looking like what I was. Alone. That's when he sat down. I didn't notice him at first because I was staring at a text from Sophie. She'd written, "How bad is it?" I was typing worse than I thought, when a chair scraped against the floor and a voice said, "This seat taken?" I looked up. He was tall, dark hair that looked like he'd tried to comb it but gave up halfway through, and eyes that were kind in a way that made me suspicious. He wore a gray suit that fit well but wasn't flashy, and he was holding 2 glasses of champagne. I blinked at him. "The seat?" He gestured to the chair beside me. I glanced around the empty table. All 7 chairs were very clearly not taken. No. Go ahead. He sat down, set 1 glass in front of me, kept the other. Then he leaned in just slightly, just enough that his voice didn't carry, and said, "I'm Lucas. And I'm guessing by the way you've been sitting here looking like you're at a funeral, you're not having the time of your life." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. Just stared. He continued, "Look, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I've been watching people avoid this table like it's cursed, and I figured maybe you could use some company. Unless you prefer solitude, in which case I'll take my champagne and go." Something about the way he said it, no pity, no performance, just honesty, made my throat loosen. I picked up the glass he'd set in front of me. "I'm Maya. And no, I don't prefer solitude. I just wasn't given much of a choice." He nodded slowly like that made perfect sense. "Family." I hesitated, then figured what did it matter? He was a stranger. I'd never see him again. "My brother's the groom." Lucas raised his eyebrows. "And they put you back here?" I laughed and it came out bitter. "Yeah, well, I'm not exactly the favorite." He took a sip of his champagne, eyes still on me. "Their loss." We sat in silence for a moment, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the first time all day I didn't feel like I needed to perform or shrink or apologize for existing. Then Lucas said, "Here's what I'm thinking. You and I are going to act like we're together. Not in a weird way. Just, like we came here as a date. That way when people look over here and see you sitting alone, they won't. They'll see us. And maybe that'll make this whole thing slightly less awful." I stared at him. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because I've been to weddings where I felt like I didn't belong. And because your brother's best man, Tyler, has already asked me 3 times if I'm lost." Apparently sitting at the back table wasn't in the groomsman handbook. I should have said no. I should have told him it was fine, I didn't need charity. But the truth was I did need it. Not charity. Just someone. Anyone. So I said okay. He smiled. It was a good smile. The kind that reaches the eyes. "Okay." Then he raised his glass. "To surviving weddings we didn't want to attend." I clinked my glass against his. "To strangers who don't ask stupid questions." And just like that, table 17 didn't feel like exile anymore. Felt like rebellion. Lucas wasn't lying about playing the part. Within 10 minutes of him sitting down, he transformed table 17 from a pity station into something that almost looked intentional. He draped his suit jacket over the back of his chair like he'd been planning to sit there all along. He angled his body toward me when he talked, the way people do when they're actually interested in what you're saying. And when a server came by with a tray of appetizers, he took 2 plates, handed me one, and said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I told you the bacon wrap dates would be good." I hadn't said anything about bacon wrap dates, but I played along. "You were right," I said, biting into one. "These are incredible." The server smiled at us like we were normal. Like we belonged. Felt strange being seen. Not as the forgotten sister or the obligation invite, but as half of something. Pair. Lucas seemed to understand the assignment without needing a script. When my mother walked past our table on her way to the bar, he stood up slightly and nodded at her with this polite confidence that made her pause. She looked at him, then at me, and her expression flickered with something I couldn't quite name. Confusion maybe. Or annoyance that. I wasn't sitting alone like she'd expected. She didn't say anything. Just smoothed her lavender dress and kept walking. But I saw her glance back once, and that tiny crack in her composure felt like a victory I hadn't known I needed. Lucas sat back down and caught my eye. "Friend of yours?" I snorted into my champagne. "That's my mother." His eyebrows went up. "Ah, the woman who didn't save you a seat up front." I nodded. "The very same." He leaned back in his chair, studying the room like he was taking notes. "Big family?" I shook my head. "Small family. Just me, my brother, and my parents. But you wouldn't know it by looking at this wedding." Derek's the center of their universe. I'm more like a distant moon they forget to check on. Lucas tilted his head. What do you do? I hesitated. People usually ask that question as a setup for judgment. When I told them I was a barista and a freelance graphic designer, I could see them doing the math, calculating my worth, deciding I wasn't serious or successful or whatever metric they used to measure adults. But Lucas's face stayed open, genuinely curious. So I told him, I make coffee during the day at a place called Sunrise Brew. And at night I design logos, websites, illustrations, whatever people will pay me for. I went to art school, which my parents considered a waste of money and my brother considered a hobby. He nodded slowly. Did you design anything for this wedding? The question landed like a stone in my chest. I designed the invitations, actually. Spent weeks on them. My mother asked me to do it as my gift to Derek and Brittany. Lucas's jaw tightened just slightly. Let me guess. They didn't credit you. I shook my head. Brittany posted about them on Instagram and tagged the printing company. Lucas exhaled through his nose. A sharp sound that might have been a laugh or might have been disbelief. That's brutal. It was brutal, but hearing someone else name it made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. I'd been so busy convincing myself it didn't matter, that I was overreacting, that I hadn't let myself actually feel angry about it. But sitting there with Lucas, a stranger who had no reason to care and yet somehow did, the anger started to uncurl in my chest like something that had been waiting for permission. Yeah, I said quietly. It was. Lucas leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know what I think? I think people who don't value artists are people who've never created anything worth keeping. And I think your brother and his bride are so obsessed with looking perfect that they forgot to actually be good. I stared at him. That's a pretty strong opinion for someone who just met me. He shrugged. I'm a quick study. The DJ announced that dinner would be served shortly, and servers began emerging from the kitchen with trays of salad. Our table got served last, which didn't surprise me. Lucas and I ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. But I kept glancing around the room, watching my family move through the reception like actors in a play I hadn't been given lines for. My father was standing near the bar with a group of men in expensive watches, laughing too loud at something that probably wasn't funny. My mother was flitting between tables, hugging people, posing for photos, playing the role of mother of the groom with Oscar-worthy commitment. And Derek and Brittany were at their sweetheart table, feeding each other bites of salad and gazing into each other's eyes like they were the only two people in the room. Maybe they were. Maybe that's what love looked like when you'd never had to fight for a seat at the table. Lucas must have noticed me staring because he said, Do they know you're here? I turned back to him. What? Your family. Do they know you showed up? I frowned. Of course they know. I RSVP'd. He shook his head. No, I mean, do they know you're here right now, in this room at this wedding? Have any of them come over to say hi? Have any of them acknowledged you at all? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. 'Cause he was right. I'd been here for over an hour, and not a single member of my family had spoken to me. Not my parents, not Derek, not even a distant cousin or an aunt. I was a ghost at my own brother's wedding. I set my fork down, suddenly not hungry. Lucas reached across the table, not touching me but close enough that I could feel the intent. Hey, he said gently. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it worse. You didn't, I said, and I meant it. You're just the first person to notice. He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. This wedding would be a lot more boring without you. I laughed despite myself. You've known me for like 30 minutes. He raised his champagne glass. Best 30 minutes of this whole event. The servers cleared our salad plates and brought out the main course. I'd selected chicken on my RSVP card, but when the server set a plate in front of me, it was fish. I stared at it, this sad little piece of salmon with a lemon wedge and some asparagus that looked like it had given up. Lucas looked at his plate, which was also fish, then at me. Did you order this? I shook my head. I ordered chicken. He flagged down a passing server, a young guy with a nervous smile. Excuse me, I think there's been a mix-up. My date ordered chicken, but she got fish. The server checked his notepad, flipping pages. I'm sorry, sir, but according to our chart, table 17 was marked for fish only. Lucas's expression didn't change, but his voice got quieter, which somehow made it more intense. And why would an entire table be marked for one option when guests were given a choice? The server stammered. I am not sure, sir. That's just what the chart says. I'll check with the kitchen. He scurried off and Lucas turned to me. You want to bet your family told them not to bother with choices for table 17? The thought hadn't even occurred to me, but now that he said it, it made perfect sense. Of course they had. Why waste good chicken on the table no one cared about? The server returned a few minutes later with a plate of chicken, apologetic and embarrassed. Here you go, miss. I'm so sorry about the confusion. I thanked him, and he disappeared back into the kitchen. Lucas watched me cut into the chicken. You're being very calm about this. I shrugged. I've had a lifetime of practice. We ate, and Lucas told me about himself to balance the scales. He was a software developer 30 years old, originally from Portland, but he'd moved to Austin 6 months ago for a job at a tech startup downtown. He didn't know Derek well, just worked with him on some consulting project that involved a lot of emails and very few actual conversations. When the wedding invitation came, he almost didn't go, but his boss suggested it would be good for networking. So here he was, sitting at table 17 with a woman he'd never met, eating chicken that had required an intervention. Sounds like we're both here out of obligation, I said. He grinned. Yeah, but at least. Now we're obligated together. The toast started after dinner. The best man, Tyler, stood up with a microphone and a glass of whiskey, and launched into a story about Derek in college that involved a fraternity prank and a goat. People laughed. My father laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. I didn't laugh. I just watched Derek, who was shaking his head like a shucks, you got me, loving every second of the attention. Then Brittany's maid of honor, Jessica, gave a toast about how Brittany had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and how Derek was her Prince Charming, and how love like theirs was rare and precious. She didn't mention me either. Not that I expected her to. I wasn't part of their fairy tale. I was the troll under the bridge. When the toasts ended, my father stood up. He wasn't supposed to give a toast, or at least it wasn't on the program, but he grabbed the microphone anyway because Robert Chen never missed an opportunity to hear himself talk. He cleared his throat and the room quieted. I want to say a few words about my son, he began, and my stomach dropped. He talked about Derek's childhood, his achievements, his bright future. He talked about how proud he was, how Derek had always been driven, focused, destined for greatness. He talked about Brittany and how she was the perfect partner, the kind of woman who would support Derek's ambitions and build a beautiful life together. He raised his glass. To Derek and Brittany, may your love be as strong as your commitment to excellence. Everyone cheered. Everyone clinked glasses. Everyone looked at my father like he'd just delivered the Gettysburg Address. And not once, not in a single sentence of that entire speech, did he mention that Derek had a sister. Lucas leaned over and whispered, "Does your dad know you exist?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. Some days I'm not sure. Lucas's hand moved across the table, and this time he did touch me, just his fingers brushing against mine. Brief. Warm. Solid. You exist, he said quietly. I see you. The dancing started after the toasts. Derek and Brittany took the floor for their first dance, some slow romantic song that I didn't recognize. They swayed under the string lights, and everyone pulled out their phones to record it like it was a moment that needed preserving. My mother cried again. My father beamed. I felt like I was watching a commercial for a life I'd never be invited to buy. When the song ended, the DJ invited everyone to join the couple on the dance floor. People flooded forward, couples pairing off, groups forming, and within seconds the floor was packed. Lucas stood and held out his hand. Dance with me. I looked up at him. You don't have to keep doing this. Keep doing what? Pretending you want to be around me. He didn't pull his hand back. I'm not pretending. And besides, we've committed to the bit. Can't stop now. I hesitated, then took his hand. It was warm and slightly calloused, the hand of someone who worked with his fingers but didn't baby them. He led me onto the dance floor. Not to the center where Derek and Brittany were spinning like they were auditioning for Dancing with the Stars, but to the edge where the lights were softer and the crowd was thinner. The song was something upbeat, and Lucas wasn't a great dancer, but he wasn't trying to be. He just moved with this easy unself-consciousness that made me feel less ridiculous for not knowing what to do with my arms. We laughed when he almost stepped on my foot. We laughed harder when I actually stepped on his. And for a few minutes I forgot that I was the unwanted sister at table 17. I was just Maya, dancing with a man who saw me when no one else did. Then I saw my mother watching us from the edge of the dance floor. She had that look on her face, the one she got when something unexpected happened and she hadn't decided yet if it was good or bad. She said something to the woman next to her, and they both looked at me. I felt my body tense. Lucas noticed. "What's wrong?" "My mom is staring at us." He didn't turn to look, just kept swaying. "Let her stare." I shook my head. "You don't understand. She's going to ask questions. She's going to want to know who you are." He smiled. "So we'll tell her. I'm Lucas. I'm your date. We met through mutual friends. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks. It's casual but promising." I blinked at him. "You just made all of that up." He shrugged. "Yeah, but it sounds good, doesn't it? And honestly, it's not that far from the truth. We did meet through mutual circumstances. We are seeing each other right now, and I'd say it's definitely promising." Before I could respond, my mother was there, cutting through the crowd with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. She tapped Lucas on the shoulder, all smiles and politeness. "Excuse me, I don't believe we've met. I'm Patricia, Maya's mother." Lucas turned, and his whole demeanor shifted into something smooth and charming, like he'd been preparing for this moment. "Patricia, it's so nice to meet you. I'm Lucas Bennett. I'm a friend of Derek's from work. Your son's a great guy." My mother's smile tightened just a fraction. "Oh, how lovely. And you're here with Maya?" She said it like it was a question that didn't make sense, like she couldn't fathom why anyone would choose to be here with me. Lucas didn't miss a beat. "Yes, ma'am. We've been seeing each other for a little while now. I have to say you raised an incredible daughter. She's been telling me all about the invitation she designed for the wedding. Absolutely beautiful work." My mother's face did something complicated. "Thank you," she said, but her voice had cooled. "Maya's very talented." She looked at me and there was something sharp in her eyes. "I didn't know you were bringing someone, sweetheart. You didn't mention it. 'Cause you didn't ask," I wanted to say. 'Cause you didn't care. But Lucas jumped in before I could. "Last-minute decision," he said smoothly. "I had a work thing that got cancelled and Maya mentioned the wedding, so here I am. I hope that's all right." My mother's smile was pure ice. "Of course it's all right. Any friend of Derek's is welcome." She looked at me again. "We should catch up later, Maya. There's so much we haven't talked about." Then she glided away, back into the crowd, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Lucas turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded even though I wasn't sure. "She's going to tell my dad. And then they're both going to interrogate me." He squeezed my hand gently. "Then we'll handle it. Together." The word landed softly. Together. I'd been alone for so long I'd forgotten what that word felt like. The night continued in strange waves. Lucas and I danced to a few more songs, then retreated back to table 17 for water and a break from the chaos. We watched people get progressively drunker, ties loosening, heels coming off, inhibitions dissolving into the open bar. My father gave another impromptu speech, this one less coherent. Brittany's mother ugly cried through 3 songs. Derek did a shot off Brittany's shoe, and everyone cheered like it was the height of romance and not a recipe for food poisoning. Lucas leaned over at one point and said, "I've been to a lot of weddings, but this one is truly something else." I laughed. "Is that a compliment?" He considered. "Let's call it an observation." Around 10 o'clock, the DJ announced the bouquet toss. All the single ladies were summoned to the dance floor, and I felt my entire body recoil. "Absolutely not," I muttered. Lucas grinned. "Come on, don't you want to catch some flowers and find true love?" I gave him a look. "I'm good, thanks." But Brittany was scanning the crowd, and when her eyes landed on me, she waved me over with this big performative gesture. "Maya, get up here." Everyone turned to look. My mother was nodding encouragingly. My father was smiling like this was all very charming. And I realized with sinking clarity that this wasn't about including me. This was about optics. About looking like a loving family. About making sure the photos showed everyone participating. I stood up and Lucas whispered, "You don't have to." "I know," I said. "But if I don't, it'll be a whole thing." I walked to the dance floor, joining a cluster of women in cocktail dresses and forced enthusiasm. Brittany turned her back to us, counted down from 3, and launched the bouquet into the air. It arced high, spinning in the string lights, and came down directly toward me. I could have caught it. My hands were right there. But at the last second I stepped aside and let it fall to the floor. Another woman dove for it, shrieking with joy, and I walked off the dance floor while everyone clapped. Lucas was waiting at the table. That was deliberate, he said. I sat down. I'm not interested in their scraps. He smiled, and it was full of something that looked like pride. Good. The rest of the reception blurred together. Cake cutting. More dancing. Sparklers handed out for the big exit. I participated in none of it. Lucas and I stayed at table 17 talking about everything and nothing. He told me about Portland, about how he missed the rain but didn't miss the cold. I told him about art school, about the projects I loved and the ones I did just to pay rent. We talked like people who'd known each other longer than a few hours, and it felt easy in a way I wasn't used to. Around 11:30, people started leaving. My parents were among the first to go, stopping by the sweetheart table to hug Derek and Brittany, take a few more photos and then head out. My mother walked past table 17 without stopping. My father didn't even look. And just like that, I'd attended my brother's entire wedding without a single real conversation with my family. Lucas watched them go. You're better off, he said. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. When the wedding finally wound down, Lucas and I walked out to the parking lot together. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the barn. We stopped near my car, and I realized I didn't want the night to end. Thank you, I said. For everything. For sitting with me. For pretending. For making this bearable. He looked at me, and his expression was serious. I wasn't pretending, Maya. Not about any of it. My heart did something strange in my chest. We should do this again, he said. Not a fake date at a wedding. A real one. Coffee, maybe? Or dinner. Your choice. I smiled and it felt real. Coffee. I work at Sunrise Brew. Come by tomorrow. I'll make you the best oat milk latte you've ever had. He grinned. It's a date. We stood there for another moment, neither of us moving, and then he leaned in and kissed my cheek. Soft. Brief. Just enough to leave a warmth behind. Good night, Maya Chen. Good night, Lucas Bennett. I drove home with the windows down, the night air rushing through the car, and for the first time in months I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. And that changed everything. Lucas showed up at Sunrise Brew the next morning at 9:45. Exactly 15 minutes before I told him my shift ended. I was wiping down the espresso machine when the door chimed, and I looked up to see him walking in wearing jeans and a faded gray Henley that made him look less like the polished wedding guest and more like someone I might actually know. He caught my eye and smiled, and I felt something flip in my chest that had nothing to do with caffeine. I'll have that oat milk latte you promised, he said, leaning against the counter. And maybe a croissant if you're trying to impress me. I rolled my eyes but couldn't stop smiling. One latte and one croissant. Anything else? Or are you going to keep making demands? He pretended to think about it. That's good for now. But I reserve the right to escalate later. I made his drink with more care than I'd made any drink all morning, getting the foam exactly right, the temperature perfect. When I handed it to him, our fingers brushed, and I remembered the way his hand had felt on the dance floor, steady and sure. He took a sip and closed his eyes like he was tasting something sacred. "Kay," he said. "This is genuinely incredible. You weren't lying." "I never lie about coffee," I said. "It's the one thing I take seriously." He paid, left a tip that was double the cost of his order, and then sat down at one of the small tables near the window. He didn't pull out his phone or a laptop. He just sat there drinking his latte waiting. My coworker Jen elbowed me from behind the register. "Who is that and why is he looking at you like you hung the moon?" I felt my face heat up. "That's Lucas. We met at my brother's wedding." She raised an eyebrow. And nothing. "We're just getting coffee." She snorted. "Babe, that man is not here for coffee. He's here for you. Go talk to him before I do." When my shift ended, I untied my apron, clocked out, and walked over to Lucas's table. He stood up when I approached, which was oddly formal and oddly charming at the same time. "So," he said, "coffee round two? Or do you want to do something else?" I grabbed my bag from behind the counter. "Let's walk. Austin's good for walking." We left Sunrise Brew and wandered down South Congress, past the murals and vintage shops and food trucks that made the street feel alive, even on a Sunday morning. Lucas didn't ask about the wedding right away, which I appreciated. Instead, he asked about my art, about what I liked to design, what I wanted to create if money wasn't an issue. I told him about a project I'd been thinking about for months. A series of illustrations about women who'd been erased from history. Artists, scientists, writers who did the work but never got the credit. Women whose names were footnotes or forgotten entirely. I wanted to bring them back, make them visible again. Give them the recognition they deserved even if it was 100 years too late. Lucas listened like every word mattered. That's powerful, he said. You should do it. I shrugged. It doesn't pay the bills. He stopped walking and turned to face me. Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe some things are worth doing just because they matter. We ended up at Zilker Park, sitting on the grass near the water, watching dogs chase frisbees and kids climb trees. It felt normal in a way my life rarely did. Easy. Uncomplicated. Lucas lay back on the grass, hands behind his head, staring up at the sky. So tell me, he said. What happens now? With your family, I mean. After last night. I picked at the grass, pulling up little green blades. Nothing probably. They'll pretend it didn't happen. Pretend I wasn't there. It's what they always do. He turned his head to look at me. And you're okay with that? I didn't answer right away because I didn't know if I was okay with it or if I just convinced myself I had to be. Finally I said, I don't know if okay is the right word. But I'm used to it. That's not the same thing, he said quietly. No, I agreed. It's not. We sat in silence for a while and then Lucas said, you know what I think? I think you're waiting for them to see you. But they're not going to. Not because you're not worth seeing, but because they've built an entire life around not looking. And the longer you wait, the smaller you make yourself. His words hit me harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes start to burn. I blinked fast, trying to keep it together, but a tear slipped out anyway. Lucas sat up, and his expression shifted into something soft and concerned. Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. You didn't. Nobody's ever said it like that before. He reached over and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. You don't have to keep waiting for their permission to matter, Maya. You already do. We stayed at the park until the sun started to sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lucas walked me back to my car, and before I got in he said, can I see you again? I laughed. You just spent the entire day with me. I know, he said. And I want to do it again. Tuesday. Dinner? I'll cook. You cook? He grinned. I make a mean pasta. It's one of 3 things I know how to make, but it's a solid one. I agreed and he kissed my cheek again. The same soft brush of lips that left me feeling warm all the way home. That night I lay in bed staring at my phone. There were no messages from my family. No texts asking how I was, if I got home okay, if I had a good time. Nothing. But there was a message from Lucas. Thanks for today. Best Sunday I've had in a long time. I smiled and typed back same. Then I opened Instagram, something I almost never did because scrolling through my family's highlight reel was usually an exercise in self-torture. But tonight I was curious. I wanted to see how they'd spun the wedding, what narrative they were selling. Brittany had posted at least 30 photos. Her in her dress. Her and Derek kissing under the arch. Her cutting the cake. Her dancing with her father. Every image was filtered to perfection, glowing and golden like a fairy tale come to life. The captions were full of gratitude and love and hashtags. Best day ever. Forever starts now. Luckiest girl in the world. I scrolled through all of them, and not a single photo included me. Not one. It was like I hadn't been there at all. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. Then I saw a photo my mother had posted. It was from the ceremony, a wide shot of the rows of white chairs and the arch by the lake. The caption read, "So blessed to celebrate our son and his beautiful bride surrounded by family and loved ones." I zoomed in on the photo, scanning the crowd. I could see my parents in the front row. I could see Brittany's family. I could see strangers I didn't recognize. And if I looked very carefully at the very edge of the frame, almost cut off entirely, I could see the corner of the decorative column I'd hidden behind. You couldn't see me. Just the column. Just the evidence that I'd been pushed to the margins even in the photos. I closed Instagram and opened my design software. I didn't have a plan, just a need to create something, to make something that felt true. I started sketching, letting my hand move without overthinking. What emerged was a figure, a woman standing alone in an empty room. But she wasn't sad. She was looking at a door, and the door was open and light was pouring through. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt right. It felt like something shifting inside me. Tuesday came, and I drove to Lucas's apartment in South Lamar. It was a small one-bedroom on the second floor of a complex that had seen better days but still had charm. He opened the door in an apron that said "Kiss the Cook," which he immediately pointed to with a grin. "Gift from my sister. I have no choice but to wear it." I laughed. "Does it come with a guarantee?" He pretended to consider. "Only if you're willing to take the risk." The apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and there was music playing, something jazzy and instrumental that I didn't recognize. Lucas had set the small dining table with actual plates and cloth napkins, which felt absurdly fancy for a Tuesday night. "Sit," he said, guiding me to a chair. "Wine?" I nodded, and he poured me a glass of red, then went back to the kitchen to finish cooking. I watched him move around the small space, confident and relaxed, stirring pasta, tasting sauce, adjusting seasoning. It was domestic in a way that made my chest ache. I'd never had this. Never had someone cook for me, care for me, make space for me in their life without conditions or caveats. When he brought the plates over, the pasta looked restaurant quality. I took a bite and it was perfect. Rich and savory and exactly what I needed. "You weren't kidding," I said. "This is really good." He sat down across from me looking pleased. "Told you. One of 3 things. What are the other 2? "Scrambled eggs and grilled cheese. So basically you can handle breakfast and lunch." "Exactly. Dinner's my only impressive meal, so I have to make it count." We ate and talked, and Lucas asked me about my family again, but this time it didn't feel invasive. It felt like he genuinely wanted to understand. I told him about growing up in Derek's shadow, about how every achievement I had was minimized and every mistake was magnified. I told him about the time I won a regional art competition in high school, and my parents didn't come to the ceremony because Derek had a baseball game. I told him about college, how I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for supplies because my parents said if I wanted to waste money on art, I could waste my own. Lucas listened without interrupting, and when I finished he said, "They don't deserve you." I know that sounds like a platitude, but I mean it. You're talented and kind and resilient, and they've spent your whole life making you feel like you're not enough. But you are. You're more than enough. I felt tears prick my eyes again, and I laughed to cover it. "You need to stop making me cry." He smiled. "Sorry. I'll try to be less sincere." We cleaned up together, and then Lucas suggested we watch a movie. We ended up on his couch, a respectable distance apart at first, but halfway through the film I leaned against him and he put his arm around me, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When the movie ended, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in this bubble where I was seen and valued and cared for. But it was late, and I had work in the morning, so I stood and grabbed my bag. Lucas walked me to the door. "This was really nice," I said. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, and the gesture was so gentle it made my heart stutter. He agreed. "Let's do it again." "Same time next week?" I nodded. "Same time next week." Over the next few weeks, Lucas and I fell into a rhythm. Coffee dates, walks around the city, dinners at his place or cheap tacos at food trucks. He met my friend Sophie, who immediately approved and texted me later, "If you don't marry this man, I will." We talked about everything. Books, music, childhood fears, future dreams. He told me about his family in Portland, his 2 younger sisters, his parents who were still happily married after 35 years. He showed me photos and I felt a pang of jealousy at how normal they looked. How easy. I told him more about my art, showed him my portfolio, the projects I'd loved and the ones I'd done just for money. He looked at each piece carefully, asking questions, making connections I hadn't seen. "You should sell these," he said, pointing to a series of watercolor illustrations I'd done of Austin landmarks. "People would buy them." I shrugged. "Maybe." He looked at me seriously. "Not maybe. Definitely. You're standing in your own way, Maya." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I kissed him instead. It was our first real kiss, not a peck on the cheek but something deeper, something that tasted like possibility. Things were good. Better than good. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something that was mine. Not my family's. Not dictated by their expectations or their neglect. Just mine. But of course, good things in my life never lasted long without interference. 3 weeks after the wedding, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. Her name on my screen felt like a warning. But curiosity got the better of me, so I picked up. Hello? Maya, sweetheart. Mom. I waited. She continued. I wanted to check in. We haven't heard from you since the wedding. I bit back the urge to laugh. You haven't reached out since the wedding either. She made a soft sound like I'd wounded her. Well, I'm reaching out now. I was hoping we could have lunch. Just the two of us. Catch up. Every instinct told me to say no. But there was a part of me, small and stupid and hopeful, that wondered if maybe this was real. Maybe she actually wanted to connect. So I said yes. We agreed to meet at a bistro in Westlake Hills, her part of town, her choice of restaurant. I should have known then that this wasn't about me. When I arrived, she was already seated at a table by the window, wearing a cream blouse and pearls, looking like she'd stepped out of a catalog for aspirational mothers. She stood and hugged me, and it felt performative, like she was aware of the other diners watching. Maya, you look well, she said, scanning me up and down in a way that felt more like an appraisal than a compliment. We ordered, and she made small talk about the weather, about Brittany and Derek's honeymoon in Greece, about a charity event she was planning. I waited for the real reason she'd called, and finally it came. So, she said, setting down her fork, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. I tensed. Okay. Several people mentioned seeing you there with a man. Lucas, I think. My stomach dropped. Yes, Lucas. He's a friend of Derek's. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He seemed very attentive. Are you two seeing each other? I hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. Yes, we've been dating. Her expression flickered, something I couldn't quite read. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm happy for you. But I do want to say, and please don't take this the wrong way, but I think it's important to be careful about moving too fast. You have a tendency to get attached quickly, and I'd hate to see you get hurt. I stared at her. I've known Lucas for 3 weeks, Mom. I'm not getting married. I'm just happy. She reached across the table and patted my hand. Of course you are. I just worry. You know how you can be sensitive. I pulled my hand back. What does that mean? She sighed like I was being difficult. It means you feel things very deeply, Maya. And sometimes that makes you vulnerable. I just want you to protect yourself. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. You didn't worry about me being vulnerable when you didn't invite me to sit with the family at Derek's wedding. You didn't worry about my feelings when Dad gave a toast and didn't mention I existed. But now that I'm happy, now you're concerned? Her face hardened. That's not fair. We invited you to the wedding. You were there. Table 17, I said. Alone. In the back. With the kitchen doors banging into my chair every 5 minutes. She looked around the restaurant, clearly uncomfortable with the volume of my voice. People are staring, she hissed. Let them, I said. I'm tired of pretending, Mom. I'm tired of acting like it doesn't hurt that you treat me like an afterthought. I designed those invitations for free, and Brittany didn't even credit me. I showed up to Derek's wedding, and none of you said a word to me. Not you, not Dad, not Derek. I was invisible. Her eyes were cold now. You're being dramatic. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You make everything about you. It was Derek's day. His and Brittany's. Not yours. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You're right, I said. It was their day. And I didn't try to take that away from them. I just wanted to be acknowledged. I wanted to be treated like I was part of the family. But I'm done waiting for that. I'm done shrinking myself to make you comfortable. She stood too, her voice tight. If you walk out of this lunch, Maya, don't expect me to keep reaching out. This is on you. I picked up my bag. Good, I said. Because I'm not interested in surface-level lunches where you pretend to care, while telling me I'm too sensitive for having feelings. I'd rather be alone than invisible. I walked out of the restaurant, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I got into my car and sat there for a long moment, waiting for the regret to hit. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know I could put down. I drove to Lucas's apartment, and when he opened the door and saw my face, he didn't ask questions. He just pulled me inside and held me while I cried. Not sad tears. Angry tears. Relieved tears. Tears that tasted like freedom. The fallout from the lunch with my mother came faster than I expected. By that evening, my phone was buzzing with messages. First from my father, a text that read, "Your mother is very upset. We need to talk about your behavior." Then from Derek, who apparently had been briefed on the situation. "Maya, seriously? You couldn't just have a normal lunch without causing drama?" And finally, from a number I didn't recognize but suspected was Brittany. "Thanks for ruining what was supposed to be a nice family moment. Always about you, isn't it?" I read each message once, felt the familiar pull to defend myself, to explain, to smooth things over. But then I remembered the way my mother had looked at me across that table, the way she dismissed my pain as dramatics, the way she threatened to stop reaching out like that was some devastating loss. And I realized I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them anything. So I didn't respond. Not to my father, not to Derek, not to whoever was texting from that unknown number. I just silenced my notifications and put my phone face down on Lucas's coffee table. Lucas came back from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea, sat down beside me and said, "You want to talk about it, or do you want to watch something mindless and eat ice cream?" I leaned my head on his shoulder. Mindless and ice cream sounds perfect. We spent the rest of the night on his couch watching cooking competition shows and eating mint chocolate chips straight from the carton. He didn't press me for details, didn't try to fix anything. Just let me exist in whatever I was feeling. And that meant more than any grand gesture ever could. The next morning, I woke up in Lucas's bed. Nothing had happened, we'd just fallen asleep talking, and he'd insisted I take the bed while he took the couch. When I walked out to the living room, he was already awake, making coffee. "Morning," he said with a sleepy smile. "How are you feeling?" "Honestly, lighter." He handed me a mug. "Good. That's good." We sat at his small kitchen table, and I told him everything. The lunch, my mother's comments, the messages from my family. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished he said, "So what do you want to do now?" I thought about it. For so long my life had been defined by waiting. Waiting for my family to notice me, to value me, to make space for me. But sitting there with Lucas, in his tiny apartment that smelled like coffee and felt like safety, I realized I was done waiting. "I want to build something that's mine," I said. "Something they can't touch or diminish. I want to finish that illustration series about forgotten women. I want to sell my art. I want to stop designing logos for tech bros who pay me in LinkedIn endorsements and start creating work that actually matters." Lucas's eyes lit up. "Then do it. What's stopping you?" "Fear," I admitted. "Money. The usual things." He leaned forward. "What if we solved the money part? What if I helped you get started? You could set up an online shop, print some of your work, see what sells. I'll cover the initial costs as an investment. You pay me back when you can, or don't. I don't care. I just want to see you do this." I stared at him. "Why would you do that?" He reached across the table and took my hand. "Because I believe in you, Maya. And because someone should have been investing in your dreams a long time ago. If your family won't, I will." I didn't cry this time. I just squeezed his hand and said, "Okay, let's do it." Over the next 2 months, my life transformed in ways I hadn't thought possible. Lucas and I worked together to set up an online shop. I called it Reclaimed, a name that felt right for what I was doing. Reclaiming my voice, my worth, my narrative. I finished the illustration series about forgotten women. 12 pieces in total, each one honoring a scientist, artist, or activist who'd been erased or minimized by history. I printed them on high-quality paper, framed them myself to keep costs down, and listed them for sale. The first week I sold 3 prints. The second week 7. By the end of the first month I'd sold 42, and people were messaging me asking for custom work, commissions, more pieces in the series. I couldn't believe it. Lucas could. He'd frame each sale like a victory, bringing home cheap champagne to celebrate every milestone. When I made my first $1,000 in profit, he took me to dinner at a nice restaurant, the kind I'd never been able to afford on my own, and toasted to the first of many successes. Work at Sunrise Brew became secondary. I was still there, still making lattes and cleaning the espresso machine, but it didn't define me anymore. It was just a job, a paycheck, a means to an end while I built something bigger. Jen noticed the shift. "You're different," she said one afternoon during a lull. "Happier." I smiled. "I am." She nudged me. "It's the guy, isn't it? The one who comes in every Sunday and looks at you like you're the only person in the room." I felt my cheeks heat. "Maybe." She laughed. No maybe about it. That man is gone for you. And honestly, you deserve it. My family predictably went silent. After those initial angry texts, there was nothing. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reconcile. It was like I'd been erased from their lives the same way they'd been erasing me for years. And the strangest thing was I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them, the fantasy family I'd always hoped they'd become. But the real them? The people who'd made me feel small and invisible and never enough? I didn't miss that at all. Sophie said it best one night over drinks. You've been grieving a family that never existed. Now you're finally free to live without ghosts. 3 months after the wedding, Lucas and I went on a road trip to Santa Fe. It was his idea. A long weekend to celebrate Reclaimed hitting $5,000 in sales. We drove through the desert with the windows down, music loud, the sky so wide and blue it felt like we were the only 2 people in the world. Santa Fe was beautiful in a way that made my fingers itch for a sketchbook. Adobe buildings, art galleries on every corner, colors so vibrant they didn't seem real. We spent our days wandering through museums and our nights eating green chili and drinking margaritas on restaurant patios. On the last night, we hiked up to a spot overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and Lucas pulled me close. I have something to tell you, he said. I looked up at him, suddenly nervous. Okay. He smiled. I'm falling in love with you, Maya. Actually, I think I've already fallen. I've been falling since the moment I sat down at table 17 and saw you sitting there like you were carrying the weight of the world. And I know it's only been a few months and maybe it's too soon to say this, but I don't care. I love you. My breath caught. I'd never heard those words before, not like this. Not from someone who actually saw me. I love you too, I whispered. He kissed me then, soft and slow, and when we pulled apart, I felt like something inside me had finally clicked into place. Like I'd been searching for home my whole life, and just realized it wasn't a place. It was a person. We stayed on that hill until the stars came out, talking about the future. About where we wanted to live, what we wanted to build, who we wanted to become. And for the first time, I let myself dream without limitations. When we got back to Austin, there was a message waiting for me. Not from my family, but from a journalist. The subject line read, Feature Request. Artist reclaiming forgotten women. My heart jumped. Opened it. The message was from a writer at a popular online arts and culture magazine. She'd found my shop, loved the work, and wanted to do a feature on me in the Reclaimed series. She mentioned that stories like mine, about artists building success outside traditional systems, were resonating with readers. She wanted to interview me, photograph some of the pieces, and publish the article within the next month. I called Lucas immediately, and he answered on the first ring. They want to feature me, I said, my voice shaking. A real magazine. A real article. He laughed, loud and joyful. Of course they do. I told you, Maya. People see what I see. You're incredible. The interview happened 2 weeks later. The journalist, a woman named Rachel, came to my studio apartment with a photographer. I'd been nervous about them seeing where I lived, the smallness of it, the way my bed doubled as my workspace. But Rachel loved it. She said it made the story more authentic, more relatable. She asked me about my art, about the inspiration behind Reclaimed, about my process. And then she asked about my family. I hesitated. This was the part one hadn't prepared for. But Rachel's expression was kind, not probing, and I found myself telling the truth. I told her about being excluded from my brother's wedding, about sitting alone at table 17, about the years of being invisible. I told her about my mother's dismissive comments and my father's toasts that never included me. And I told her about Lucas, about how a stranger's kindness had reminded me I was worth seeing. Rachel's eyes were bright when I finished. That's the heart of the story, she said. Not just the art, but the reclaiming of yourself. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. Lucas and I read it together on his couch, my laptop balanced between us. The headline was, How One Artist is Reclaiming Forgotten Women and Herself. The piece was beautiful. Rachel had woven together my story, the art, and the broader theme of women being overlooked in ways that felt powerful and true. There were photos of my illustrations, close-ups of the details, and one photo of me in my apartment holding a paintbrush looking directly at the camera. I looked strong. I looked like someone who mattered. The response was immediate. Within hours, the article had hundreds of shares. People were commenting, messaging me through my shop, ordering prints. My inbox flooded with requests for interviews, podcast invitations, gallery owners asking if I'd be interested in showing my work. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. And then, inevitably, my family saw it. I knew because my phone started ringing. First Derek, then my father, then my mother. I didn't answer any of them, but they left voicemails. Derek's was angry. Really, Maya? You're airing our private family business to the world? This is low even for you. My father's was more measured but no less manipulative. Maya, sweetheart, we need to discuss this article. It's painting us in a very unfair light. Please call me back so we can resolve this quietly. And my mother's was the one that almost broke me. Maya, I don't understand why you're doing this. We love you. We've always loved you. But you're making us look like monsters and that's not fair. Please let's talk. Let's fix this. I listened to each voicemail once, then deleted them. Lucas watched me waiting. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah, I am. Because the thing was, I didn't owe them a response. They'd had years to fix things, to see me, to make me feel like I mattered. And they'd chosen not to. Now they were upset because the world was seeing what I'd lived with my entire life. That wasn't my problem. That was theirs. The weeks following the article were a blur of opportunities. A gallery in East Austin reached out about hosting a solo show of the reclaimed series. A publisher expressed interest in turning the illustrations into a book. I was asked to speak on a panel about women in the arts. Every door I'd been knocking on for years suddenly swung open, and I walked through every single one. Lucas was there for all of it, celebrating every win, holding me through every moment of doubt. We moved in together 4 months after the article. A small 2-bedroom in South Austin that had enough space for both of us and a dedicated room for my art. Sophie helped me move, and as we unpacked boxes she said, "You know what's wild? A year ago, you were invisible to your family. Now you're everywhere and they're the ones being left out." I smiled. Funny how that works. She hugged me. I'm proud of you, Maya. You did this. You built this life. And you did it without them. The solo show opened on a Saturday night in November. The gallery was packed, people I knew and people I didn't, all there to see my work. Lucas stood beside me, his arm around my waist, and I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Halfway through the night I saw them. My parents standing near the entrance, looking out of place and uncomfortable. My mother was clutching her purse like a shield, and my father kept glancing around like he was searching for an exit. For a moment I froze. Then Lucas squeezed my hand. "You don't have to talk to them," he said quietly. "This is your night." "I know," I said. "And that's why I'm going to." I walked over and my parents looked up, both of them trying to smile. "Maya," my mother said. "This is lovely. Really. Your work is beautiful." "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice even. My father cleared his throat. "We wanted to come and support you. Show you that we're proud." I looked at them, really looked at them, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing. Just a calm, clear understanding that these people would never give me what I needed. And I didn't need it anymore. "I appreciate you coming," I said. "But I need you to know that I didn't do this for you. I didn't create this work or build this life to prove anything to you or to make you proud. I did it for me. And for everyone who's ever been made to feel invisible." My mother's face crumpled. "Maya, please. We're trying. We're here, aren't we?" "You're here now," I said. "But you weren't there when it mattered. You weren't there when I needed you. And I've spent too much time waiting for you to show up. I'm done waiting." My father stepped forward. "You're being unfair. We made mistakes, yes, but we're still your family. Family isn't just blood," I said. "It's the people who see you, who value you, who show up consistently. You've never been that for me. But I've found people who are." I glanced back at Lucas, at Sophie who was standing near the drinks table, at the crowd of strangers who'd come to see my work and celebrate what I'd built. This is my family now. And I'm good. My mother looked like she wanted to say more, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned and walked back to Lucas, back to my life, and I didn't look back. They left quietly, and I didn't see them again. The show was a success. I sold every piece. The book deal came through. I quit Sunrise Brew and became a full-time artist. Lucas and I got engaged on a quiet Tuesday night, no grand gestures, Just him asking if I wanted to build a life together and me saying yes before he even finished the question. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a park in Austin. Sophie was my maid of honor. Lucas's sisters flew in from Portland. There were 20 people total, all of them people who'd shown up for us, who loved us, who saw us. It was perfect. Standing there under the trees, holding Lucas's hands, saying vows we'd written ourselves, I thought about table 17. About sitting there alone, feeling forgotten, believing I'd always be invisible. And then I thought about the man who'd sat down beside me, who'd seen me when no one else did, who'd reminded me that I was worth showing up for. Act like you're with me, he'd said. And I had. And it had changed everything. Not because he'd saved me. I'd saved myself. But he'd been there, a witness to my becoming, a partner in my reclaiming. When the officiant pronounced us married, Lucas kissed me and everyone cheered. And for the first time in my life I felt whole. Not because I had a husband or a career or success, but because I'd stopped waiting for people who would never see me and started building a life with people who did. Later that night, as we danced under string lights in our friend's backyard, Lucas whispered, "Thank you for sitting at table 17. I laughed. "Thank you for sitting down." He pulled me closer. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," I said. And I meant it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was a message from an unknown number, and when I opened it I saw a photo. It was my family, all of them at some restaurant. Derek and Brittany, my parents, all dressed up, all smiling at the camera. Below the photo a message. "We're having a family dinner. Wish you were here." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Lucas noticed. "Everything okay?" I slipped my phone back into my pocket and smiled up at him. "Everything's perfect." And it was. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of my life. You can't make people see you. But you can stop dimming your light to make them comfortable. You can stop waiting for a seat at their table and build your own. You can reclaim yourself, your voice, your worth. And when you do, the right people will find you. They'll sit down beside you. They'll say, "Act like you're with me." And you'll realize you were never really alone. You were just waiting in the wrong room. The music swelled and Lucas spun me under the lights. I laughed, dizzy and happy and free. This was my life now. Not the one my family had written for me, but the one I'd written for myself. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. Somewhere across town, my family was probably still at that restaurant, taking more photos, posting more updates, living their perfectly curated lives. And I hoped they were happy. I really did. But I didn't need to be part of it anymore. I had everything I needed right here. A man who loved me, friends who celebrated me, work that fulfilled me, and a future that was entirely my own. I wasn't the girl at table 17 anymore. I was the woman who'd walked away from that table and built something better. And that made all the difference. The gallery show marked a turning point. But what came after was something I hadn't anticipated. Success, real success, doesn't just change your circumstances. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, and most surprisingly, how they rewrite history to include themselves in your story. Within a week of the show, my social media followers tripled. Strangers were sharing my work, tagging me in posts about empowerment and self-made success. Art collectors were reaching out. Corporate clients wanted commissioned pieces for their offices. And somewhere in the middle of all that momentum, my family started trying to claw their way back in. It started small. Brittany followed me on Instagram, something she'd never done before. Then she liked a few of my posts, recent ones showcasing the gallery opening. Then came a comment on a photo of one of my sold pieces. "So talented, sis. Always knew you had it in you." I stared at that comment for a long time, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Sis. She'd never called me that. During the entire wedding planning process, during the reception, during the year and a half she'd been with my brother, she'd barely acknowledged my existence. But now that I had something worth attaching herself to, suddenly I was sis. I didn't respond. I just kept scrolling, kept working, kept building. But the attempts didn't stop. My mother sent a Facebook friend request, which I'd apparently been unfriended from at some point without noticing. The request came with a message. "Maya, I've been thinking about you so much. I saw the article and the gallery photos. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. I'd love to reconnect. Can we talk?" I read it twice, looking for sincerity, finding only strategy. She wasn't proud. She was embarrassed. Embarrassed that her daughter had succeeded publicly without her support. Embarrassed that people were asking questions. Embarrassed that her narrative of the perfect family had a visible crack. Lucas found me sitting on the couch, staring at my phone with my jaw clenched. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting beside me. I showed him the message. He read it, then looked at me with those steady eyes that always made me feel grounded. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to respond to see if maybe this time it'll be different. And the other part? The other part knows it won't be. He nodded slowly. "You don't owe them anything, Maya. Not a response, not a conversation, not a second chance. But if you want to respond, if you need to for your own closure, I'll support that too. Just don't do it because you feel guilty. Do it because you want to." I sat with that for a while, turning it over in my mind. Did I want to respond? Did I want to open that door again, risk letting them back in? Risk the disappointment that would inevitably come when they proved they hadn't changed? Or did I want to protect the peace I'd built? The life I'd created without them? The answer came easier than I expected. I didn't want them back. I wanted to move forward, not backward. So I ignored the message. Days passed, then weeks, and the requests kept coming. Derek sent a text. "Hey, saw your stuff in that magazine. Pretty cool. We should grab coffee sometime." My father left a voicemail. "Maya, it's Dad. Your mother and I would really like to see you. We've been talking and we think it's time we all sat down as a family. There are things we need to say." Each message felt like a test, like they were waiting to see how much success I'd need before I came crawling back. Grateful for their attention. But I didn't crawl. I didn't even walk toward them. I stayed exactly where I was, building my life brick by brick, and it felt powerful in a way I'd never experienced before. The book deal moved forward. My publisher wanted the reclaimed series expanded. 15 more pieces honoring women who'd been written out of history. I threw myself into the research, spending hours in libraries and online archives, discovering stories that made me ache. Women who'd made groundbreaking discoveries only to have men take credit. Artists whose work had been attributed to their husbands or brothers. Writers who'd published under male pseudonyms just to be taken seriously. Each piece I created felt personal, like I was reaching back through time and saying, "I see you, I remember you, you mattered." Lucas would find me working late into the night, paint on my hands, music playing softly, completely absorbed. He'd bring me tea, kiss the top of my head and leave me to it. He understood that this wasn't just about art. It was about healing, about reclaiming not just these women's stories but my own. One night, deep into a piece about Rosalind Franklin, the scientist whose work on DNA was stolen by male colleagues, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something made me answer. "Hello? Maya." It was my brother's voice, and he sounded different. Tired maybe. Or uncertain. "Derek," I said, my guard immediately up. "Yeah. Hey. Look, I know you've been ignoring everyone, and I get it. I do. But I wanted to call and just say I'm sorry." I went quiet, waiting. He continued. "I've been thinking a lot about the wedding, about how we treated you. How I treated you. And I was wrong. You deserved better. You've always deserved better. And I've been a terrible brother." I wanted to believe him. Some small part of me that still remember playing together as kids, before he became the golden child and I became the afterthought, wanted to believe this was real. But I'd learned to trust actions over words. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Because Brittany's pregnant," he said finally. "And I keep thinking about what kind of father I want to be, what kind of family I want to build. And I realized I don't want to repeat the patterns Mom and Dad set. I don't want my kid to grow up watching one sibling get everything while the other gets scraps." I felt something twist in my chest. "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. "On the baby." "Thank you," he said. "And I mean it too. About being sorry. I know I can't fix what's already happened, but I want to try to do better going forward. If you'll let me." I took a breath. "Derek, I appreciate the apology. I do. But an apology without changed behavior is just manipulation. If you want to do better, then do better. Show up. Be consistent. Don't just call me when you're having some existential crisis about fatherhood." He laughed, short and surprised. "Fair enough. Can I start by taking you to lunch? No expectations, no family ambush. Just you and me." I hesitated. Lunch felt manageable. Public. Contained. Pay, I said. Lunch. We met the following Saturday at a casual place near campus, far enough from my parents' neighborhood that I wouldn't risk running into them. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window, looking more rumpled than I'd ever seen him. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He stood when he saw me, and for a second I thought he might try to hug me. But he seemed to sense my hesitation and just gestured to the chair across from him instead. Thanks for coming, he said once we'd sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I ordered water, bought myself time. I almost didn't. He nodded like he'd expected that. I've been following your work, he said. The gallery show, the article, all of it. Maya, it's incredible. You're incredible. I always knew you were talented, but I don't think I ever really understood what that meant until now. I studied his face, looking for the catch. And I'm ashamed, he said quietly. I'm ashamed that I didn't support you. That I let Mom and Dad treat you like you didn't matter. That I made you feel invisible at my own wedding. I should have stood up for you and I didn't. I was too busy being the perfect son, playing the role they wanted, and I sacrificed you to maintain it. His honesty caught me off guard. I'd expected deflection, excuses, maybe even some blame shifting. But this felt real. It doesn't undo the hurt, I said carefully. I know, he said. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to be better. To be the brother I should have been. We ordered food, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. His job, Brittany's pregnancy, my upcoming book. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was tentative, like we were both learning how to talk to each other without the weight of our parents' expectations crushing us. Toward the end of the meal, he said, Mom and Dad don't know I'm here, by the way. They think you're being stubborn and ungrateful. They don't understand why their success story daughter won't come back into the fold, now that you've made something of yourself. I felt anger flare. Of course they don't. He held up a hand. I'm not defending them. I'm just telling you where their heads are. They see your success as validation that they were right about something, even though they had nothing to do with it. And they're angry that you're not sharing it with them. Let them be angry, I said. I'm done performing for their approval. Good, Derek said. You should be. We left the restaurant and he walked me to my car. Before I got in, he said, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but when the baby comes, I'd like you to be part of their life. Not because of Mom and Dad, but because you're my sister. And I want my kid to know their aunt. I looked at him, this man who'd been given everything I'd been denied, who was finally waking up to the cost of that privilege. I'll think about it, I said. Over the next few months, Derek kept his word. He texted occasionally, nothing pushy, just checking in. He came to a small exhibition I had at a local coffee shop and bought 2 pieces. He invited me and Lucas to dinner at his place, no parents involved, and we went. Brittany was polite, even warm, though I could tell she was performing at least a little. But Derek seemed genuine. He asked about my work. Listened when I talked, remembered details from previous conversations. It wasn't perfect, but it was effort. An effort I was learning mattered. The baby arrived in early spring. A girl they named Claire. Derek sent me a photo from the hospital, Brittany exhausted and glowing, the baby tiny and red-faced in her arms. She's here, his text read. And I'd really love for you to meet her. I went to the hospital 2 days later, bringing a small watercolor I'd painted of a garden, something soft and hopeful for Claire's nursery. When I walked into the room, my parents were there. Of course they were. My mother looked up, and her face did something complicated. Maya, she said, standing. You came. I stayed near the door, my body tense. I came to meet my niece, I said evenly. Not to have a reunion. My father stood too, trying for a smile that didn't quite land. It's good to see you, sweetheart. We've missed you. I didn't respond to that. I just walked past them to where Brittany was holding Claire. And I looked down at this tiny new person who had no idea about family dysfunction or decades of resentment. She was just a baby, perfect and small and full of possibility. She's beautiful, I said to Brittany. Thank you, Brittany said, and there was something genuine in her voice. Do you want to hold her? I nodded, and she carefully transferred Claire into my arms. The baby was warm and surprisingly solid, and when she opened her eyes and looked at me, I felt something shift in my chest. This was the next generation. This was a chance to break the cycle, to be the aunt I'd needed when I was young. My mother stepped closer, her voice soft. You're a natural, Maya. You'll make a wonderful mother someday. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what she was doing. Trying to build a bridge with compliments, trying to ease back into my life now that there was a grandchild to tie us together. But I wasn't interested in bridges built on sand. I handed Claire back to Brittany and turned to my parents. I'm glad you got to meet her, I said to Derek, ignoring my mother and father entirely. She's lucky to have you as parents. Then I looked at my mother. I came because Derek asked me to, not because I'm ready to pretend the past didn't happen. You both made choices that hurt me deeply, and I've moved on from needing your approval or your presence in my life. If you want to be part of Claire's life, that's between you and Derek. But I'm not going to stand here and play happy family for a photo op. My father's face darkened. Maya, that's enough. This isn't the time or place. You're right, I said. It's not. Which is why I'm leaving. I walked out of that hospital room with my head high, and I didn't look back. Lucas was waiting in the parking lot, and when I got in the car, he didn't ask how it went. He just held my hand while I cried. Not sad tears, but released tears, the kind that come when you finally stop carrying weight that was never yours to carry. The book came out that summer. Reclaimed. Honoring the Women History Forgot became a bestseller within 2 weeks. I did interviews, podcasts, book signings. People connected with the work, with the stories, with the idea that visibility mattered and erasure had consequences. And in every interview, when they asked about my inspiration, I told the truth. I created this because I knew what it felt like to be forgotten by the people who were supposed to see you most. The success was surreal. I was invited to speak at universities, at conferences, at events I'd only dreamed of attending. Lucas came to every single one, sitting in the front row, beaming like I'd hung the moon. We bought a house, a small craftsman in East Austin with a yard and enough space for a real studio. I painted the studio walls white and filled it with light, and every morning I'd walk in there and feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. One afternoon, while I was working on a new series exploring modern women who'd been silenced, my phone rang. It was Sophie. Have you seen Derek's Instagram? She asked, her voice tight. No, why? Just look, she said. I pulled up his profile and there it was. A photo of him, Brittany and Claire, all dressed in white, sitting in a field of bluebonnets. The caption read, "Family is everything. Grateful for the people who show up, who support, who love unconditionally. Swipe to see our journey." I swiped. The carousel included photos from their wedding, photos from the hospital, photos of my parents holding Claire. And then, at the very end, a photo I didn't recognize. It was from the gallery show. Someone had taken a picture of me standing in front of one of my pieces, smiling, and Derek had screenshot it and included it in his family montage. The implication was clear. Look, we're all one big happy family. Maya's successful, we're all together, everything's perfect. I felt rage rise in my throat, hot and sharp. He'd done exactly what I'd feared. Used my success, my image, my moment to bolster his own narrative without asking, without acknowledging the reality of our relationship. I called him. He answered on the second ring, cheerful. Hey Maya, what's up? Take the photo down, I said, my voice cold. What photo? You know what photo? The one from my gallery show that you put in your Instagram post without my permission. There was a pause. I was just trying to include you, he said, defensive now. We're family. No, I said. You were trying to make yourself look good. You were trying to rewrite history so people don't ask uncomfortable questions about why your sister wasn't at your wedding, why she's barely in your life. You're using me, Derek. Just like everyone else in this family has always used me. That's not fair, he said. I've been trying. I've been reaching out, I've been showing up. Yeah, you have, I said. And I appreciate that. But this isn't showing up. This is performing. This is putting me in your highlight reel so you can pretend we're close without actually doing the work to rebuild trust. Take the photo down or I'll comment on the post and tell everyone exactly why I wasn't at your wedding. He went quiet. Then tightly he said, fine. I'll take it down. Good, I said, and hung up. Lucas had been listening from the doorway. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. I'm just tired of being a prop in other people's stories. The photo came down within an hour, and Derek didn't contact me again for months. When he finally did, it was a short text. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. You were right. I didn't respond. Some apologies don't deserve acknowledgement. They just deserved to sit in the silence they created. As the year came to a close, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. A year ago, I'd been invisible, sitting alone at a wedding that should have included me, wondering if I'd ever matter to the people who'd raised me. Now I had a career I loved, a partner who saw me, a home that felt like mine, and a future that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. On New Year's Eve, Lucas and I hosted a small party at our house. Sophie came, along with a few other friends I'd made through art circles and the community I'd built. We cooked together, laughed together, toasted to the year behind us and the year ahead. And as midnight approached, I stepped outside onto the back porch, needing a moment of quiet. The Austin sky was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and I felt a peace settle over me that I'd never known before. Lucas joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I leaned back into him. "I'm thinking about table 17. He laughed softly. "Still? Always," I said. "Because that's where everything changed. That's where I stopped waiting for people to save me a seat and started realizing I could build my own table." He kissed my temple. "Best table I ever sat at." Inside, someone started counting down. To 9, 8. We turned to watch through the window as our friends joined in, voices rising together. 7, 6, 5. I thought about my family, probably at some fancy party, probably taking photos, probably still pretending. For 3, 2. And I thought about the life I'd built without them, the life I'd built because of their absence, not in spite of it. 1. Happy New Year. Lucas turned me to face him and kissed me as fireworks exploded somewhere in the distance. When we pulled apart, he said, "This is going to be your year, Maya." "I know it." I smiled. "It already is." Because I'd learned the most important truth of my life. You don't need people who make you feel small to validate your worth. You don't need a seat at a table where no one wants you. You just need the courage to walk away, to build something better, to surround yourself with people who see you not as a burden or an afterthought, but as someone worthy of love, respect, and celebration. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 30 years old, and I'm not the girl who sat alone at table 17 anymore. I'm the woman who met a stranger, took a chance, and built a life so full of light that the shadows of my past couldn't touch it. I'm the woman who reclaimed herself. And that's a story worth telling. Spring arrived in Austin with the kind of warmth that felt like forgiveness, like the earth itself was saying start again. The bluebonnets bloomed across the hill country, painting the roadsides in waves of purple and blue, and I found myself spending more time outdoors, sketching in parks, taking long walks with Lucas, breathing in the possibility of new beginnings. My second book was in the editing phase, a collection that expanded beyond forgotten women to explore themes of erasure, resilience, and the power of reclaiming your narrative. My editor, a sharp woman named Patricia who reminded me of the person I hoped to become at 50, kept pushing me to go deeper, to make the work more personal. One afternoon during a video call, she said, "Maya, the illustrations are stunning. Your research is impeccable. But I need more of you in this. More of your story woven through these other stories." Readers connected with the first book because they saw themselves in your journey. Don't be afraid to show them the scars. I sat with that feedback for days, turning it over like a stone in my pocket. I'd spent so long trying to separate my personal pain from my professional work, believing that art should stand on its own merit without the weight of autobiography. But Patricia was right. The most powerful work came from vulnerability, from the willingness to say this hurt me, and I survived it, and here's what I learned. So I started writing essays to accompany each illustration. Short pieces about what each woman's story meant to me, how it echoed my own experiences of being overlooked, dismissed, erased. I wrote about sitting at table 17 and feeling like I'd been relegated to the edges of my own family's narrative. I wrote about my mother's voicemail, the way she'd reframed my hurt as dramatics, the way she'd threatened to stop reaching out as if her inconsistent attention was some kind of prize. I wrote about Derek's Instagram post, the casual theft of my image to serve his story. And I wrote about Lucas, about the stranger who'd reminded me that visibility wasn't something I had to earn. It was something I deserved. The writing was harder than the art. Every word felt like I was peeling back skin, exposing nerve endings I'd spent years protecting. But it also felt necessary, like I was finally telling the whole truth instead of the sanitized version I'd learned to perform. Lucas read the essays as I finished them, sitting beside me on the couch, his face serious and focused. When he finished the last one, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "This is brutal and beautiful," he said. "People are going to feel this in their bones." "I hope so," I said. "Because if even one person reads this and realizes they don't have to keep shrinking themselves for people who refuse to see them, it'll be worth it." As spring deepened into early summer, I received an email that stopped me cold. It was from a producer at a major streaming platform, someone I'd never heard of, but whose signature included an impressive list of documentary credits. The subject line read, "Documentary Proposal. Reclaimed." My hands trembled as I opened it. The message explained that they'd been following my work, had read both the article and the book, and believed there was a powerful documentary to be made about my journey and the broader themes of family estrangement, women's erasure, and the cost of reclaiming yourself. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in discussing the project. I called Lucas immediately, my voice shaking. "They want to make a documentary about me. About all of this." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Excited." "Completely overwhelmed." He laughed gently. "That sounds about right. Do you want to do it?" "I don't know," I said. "It feels like opening everything up again. Like inviting the world to examine the most painful parts of my life." "But maybe that's the point," he said. "Maybe that's how you take the power back completely. Not just by creating art about it, but by owning the story so thoroughly that no one can ever use it against you again." I met with the producer, a woman named Simone who had kind eyes and asked thoughtful questions. She didn't want sensationalism or family drama for the sake of ratings. She wanted to explore the deeper questions. What does it mean to be unseen by your family? How do we construct identity when the people who are supposed to reflect us back to ourselves refuse to look? What does healing look like when reconciliation isn't possible or desired? We talked for 3 hours, and by the end I'd agreed to move forward. The documentary would take a year to film, weaving together my current life, interviews with experts on family systems and trauma, and yes, my family's perspective if they agreed to participate. That last part made my stomach turn. The thought of my parents on camera, spinning their version of events, playing the misunderstood victims, made me want to back out entirely. But Simone assured me I'd have creative input, that nothing would air without my approval, that the goal wasn't to ambush anyone but to tell a complete and honest story. "I'll reach out to them," she said. "But I won't pressure them. If they decline, we'll note their absence and let that speak for itself." Something about the way she said it, calm and professional, made me trust her. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." The first day of filming felt surreal. A small crew arrived at our house, setting up lights and cameras in my studio, transforming the space I'd built for solitude into a stage. Simone sat across from me and we started with the basics. "Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your relationship with your brother. Tell me about the wedding." I told her everything, and the camera captured it all. My voice cracking when I talked about my father's toast that erased me. My hands clenching when I described sitting alone at table 17. My smile when I talked about Lucas sitting down beside me. It was exhausting and cathartic in equal measure. Over the following months, filming became part of my routine. They followed me to book events, to coffee with Sophie, to visits with Derek and Claire. They filmed Lucas and me cooking dinner, walking through the neighborhood, working side by side in comfortable silence. And yes, they reached out to my family. My parents declined to participate. The response came through their lawyer, a formal letter stating that they valued their privacy and didn't wish to be involved in a project that misrepresented their family. Simone showed me the letter, and I felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. Of course they wouldn't participate. Participation would require accountability. Derek surprisingly agreed to an interview. He reached out to me first, asking if I was okay with it, if it would hurt me to have him involved. "I appreciate you asking," I told him. "And honestly, I think your perspective could be valuable. You've seen both sides. You were the favored child, and now you're trying to break the pattern. That's part of the story too." He nodded, looking nervous. "I just don't want to make things worse." "Then tell the truth," I said. "That's all anyone can do." His interview was difficult to watch when Simone showed me the rough cut. He sat in his living room, Brittany just off camera, and talked about the guilt he carried. "I knew Maya was being treated differently," he said. "I saw it happening. But I benefited from it, so I told myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself she was fine, that she was just sensitive, that our parents were doing their best. And I was wrong. I was complicit in her pain, and I'm still learning how to live with that. There was a moment in his interview where he broke down, tears streaming down his face as he talked about watching me at his wedding. She sat there alone and I didn't do anything. I didn't save her a seat. I didn't check on her. I just let her be invisible because it was easier than confronting our parents. And I hate myself for that. Watching him say those words, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a softening. An understanding that he was carrying his own weight, his own reckoning. We were both products of the same broken system, just positioned differently within it. And while that didn't erase the harm, it added complexity to the story. The documentary also included interviews with experts. A psychologist who specialized in family estrangement talked about scapegoat and golden child dynamics. A sociologist discussed how families perform cohesion while papering over dysfunction. An art therapist explored how creativity becomes survival for people who've been silenced. Each expert added layers of understanding, helping me see my experience not as a personal failure but as a pattern, a system, something bigger than just my family's dysfunction. One of the most powerful interviews was with other women who'd been estranged from their families. Simone found them through support groups and online communities, women of different ages and backgrounds who'd all made the painful choice to walk away from families that hurt them. We filmed a roundtable discussion, 6 of us sitting in a circle sharing our stories. One woman talked about being disowned for marrying outside her religion. Another described being blamed for her parents' divorce. A third had been cut off for reporting her brother's abuse. Each story was different, but the thread connecting them was the same. We'd all been told we were the problem. We'd all been made to feel like our pain was an overreaction. We'd all been asked why we couldn't just let it go, move on, stop making things difficult. And we'd all reached a point where we chose ourselves over the family that refused to choose us. Sitting in that circle listening to these women, I felt less alone than I'd felt in years. This wasn't just my story. It was our story. A collective experience of being erased and finding the courage to write ourselves back into existence. One woman, an older artist named Gloria who'd been estranged from her family for 20 years, said something that stuck with me. People ask me if I regret it, if I miss them. And the truth is, I miss the idea of them. I miss what I thought family was supposed to be. But I don't miss the reality. I don't miss feeling small. And I wouldn't trade the peace I've built for anything. The room went quiet, and I felt tears slip down my cheeks. That's it exactly, I said. That's the whole thing. As summer shifted into fall, the documentary neared completion. Simone invited Lucas and me to a private screening, just the 3 of us in a small viewing room. Watching the finished film was one of the most intense experiences of my life. Seeing my story told with such care and clarity, seeing my pain validated and contextualized, seeing the experts explain what I'd lived through, it was overwhelming. The documentary didn't shy away from the hard parts. It showed my mother's refusal to participate. Let that absence speak volumes. It showed Derek's guilt and his attempt at accountability. It showed the women in the roundtable, their courage, their resilience. And it ended with me in my studio painting while my voiceover said, I used to think healing meant reconciliation. That I couldn't be whole unless my family accepted me. But I've learned that healing is about accepting myself. It's about building a life so full of love and purpose that their absence doesn't define me. I'm not waiting for them anymore. I'm not waiting for anyone. I'm here. I'm visible. And that's enough. When the credits rolled, I sat in the dark, crying quietly. Lucas held my hand, and Simone sat in respectful silence until I was ready to speak. That's my life, I finally said. That's really my life. Simone leaned forward. It's a beautiful life, Maya. And it's going to help so many people. The documentary premiered at a film festival in October, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. It won the Audience Award. Critics called it essential viewing, a powerful exploration of family trauma, and the courage it takes to choose yourself. It was picked up for wider distribution, streaming on the platform that had commissioned it, and within days it was trending. My inbox exploded with messages. Thousands of people writing to say thank you, to say me too, to say I thought I was the only one. Therapists were recommending it to clients. Support groups were hosting watch parties. And yes, the media attention came roaring back. I did interviews, appeared on podcasts, sat on panels about family estrangement and complex trauma. Every conversation felt important, like I was contributing to a larger cultural shift, a movement away from the toxic belief that family is everything and toward the healthier understanding that family should earn their place in your life through love and respect, not demand it through obligation and guilt. Through all of it, my family remained silent. No public statements, no attempts to contact me, nothing. It was as if they decided that ignoring the documentary would make it go away, that their silence could erase what I'd shared with the world. But their silence only reinforced what I'd said. They couldn't face the truth. They couldn't sit with the discomfort of being held accountable. So they retreated, and I let them. One afternoon in late November, I was in my studio working on a new piece when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Maya Chen? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? My name is Dr. Rachel Moore. I'm a family therapist here in Austin, and I'm calling because I have a client who's asked me to reach out to you. Your mother. My entire body went rigid. She's asked if you'd be willing to attend a therapy session with her and your father. A mediated conversation where everyone has a chance to speak and be heard. I was quiet for so long that Dr. Moore said, Maya, are you still there? I'm here, I said. I'm just trying to figure out why I would do that. She was quiet, then said gently, that's a fair question. And I want to be clear that there's no pressure. This is entirely your choice. But your mother expressed that watching the documentary made her realize some things, and she'd like an opportunity to address them with professional support. I felt 1,000 things at once. Anger that it took a public documentary for them to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Skepticism that this was genuine and not another performance. Exhaustion at the thought of rehashing everything again. But also, underneath all of that, a small flicker of curiosity. What would they say? What could they possibly offer that would feel meaningful after all this time? I'll think about it, I told Dr. Moore. And I'll let you know. I talked to Lucas about it that night, laying out all the reasons I shouldn't go and the one reason I might. What's the reason? He asked. Closure, I said. Not the kind where we all hug and pretend the past didn't happen, but the kind where I get to say everything I need to say in a space where they have to listen, where they can't walk away or dismiss me, where someone with professional training can call out their bullshit in real time. He smiled. That does sound appealing. So you're going to do it? Think so, I said. But I'm bringing you. He raised his eyebrows. To the session? I nodded. You're my family now. If they want to talk to me, they can handle you being there. Dr. Moore agreed to the arrangement, and we scheduled the session for the first week of December. The days leading up to it were tense. I had nightmares about my mother crying, about my father yelling, about me freezing and not being able to say what I needed to say. But I also prepared. I made a list of things I wanted to address. I rehearsed how I'd respond to likely deflections. I reminded myself that I was walking into that room as a whole person, not the broken girl they'd spent years diminishing. The therapy office was in a quiet building near downtown. All soft lighting and neutral colors designed to feel safe. Dr. Moore met us in the waiting room, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a calm presence. She went over the ground rules. Everyone would have a chance to speak without interruption. We'd focus on I statements rather than accusations. The goal was understanding, not resolution. Though resolution was possible if everyone engaged honestly. When she led us into the therapy room, my parents were already there, sitting on a couch across from 2 empty chairs. My mother looked older than I remembered, her face drawn, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. My father sat rigid, his jaw set, already defensive. I sat down in one of the chairs and Lucas sat beside me. Dr. Moore took a seat slightly off to the side, a neutral presence. She began by thanking everyone for coming, acknowledging that this was difficult, and reminding us of the goals. Then she looked at my parents. Patricia, Robert, you asked for this session. Would you like to start? My mother took a shaky breath. Maya, she began, and her voice cracked. I've been thinking a lot since the documentary came out. About the things you said. About how we made you feel. And I want you to know that it was never our intention to hurt you. I felt Lucas's hand find mine under the armrest. Intention doesn't erase impact, I said quietly. I know that now, my mother said, tears already starting. I do. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we didn't see you the way we should have. That we made you feel invisible. I waited for more, but she just sat there crying. Dr. Moore gently prompted, "Can you say more about what you're apologizing for specifically?" My mother looked lost. "I don't know. All of it, I suppose." "That's not enough," I said, and my voice was steady. "You're apologizing in vague terms because you don't want to name the specific ways you hurt me. But I need you to name them. I need you to acknowledge that you excluded me from Derek's wedding. That you put me at a table by myself in the back. That Dad gave multiple toasts and never mentioned I existed. That you asked me to design the invitations for free, and then didn't credit me. That when I tried to talk to you about how I felt, you called me dramatic and threatened to stop reaching out." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Maya, we were focused on Derek's day. It wasn't about you." "Exactly," I said. "It was never about me. That's the problem. You've spent my entire life making it clear that Derek mattered and I didn't. And when I finally stopped accepting that, you punished me for it." My mother reached for a tissue. "We didn't punish you. You cut us off." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I set boundaries. I stopped making myself available to people who treated me like I was less than. And instead of respecting that, you tried to manipulate me back with guilt and public performances." Dr. Moore intervened. "Maya, can you tell your parents what you needed from them that you didn't get?" I sat back, gathering my thoughts. "I needed to be seen," I said. "I needed you to show up to my art shows the way you showed up to Derek's baseball games. I needed you to ask about my life, my work, my dreams. I needed you to defend me when other people dismissed me instead of joining in. I needed you to treat me like I mattered, not just when it was convenient or when other people were watching, but consistently. And you never did that. You never chose me." My mother was sobbing now, and my father's face had gone red. "We did our best," he said tightly. "Your best wasn't good enough," I said. "And I need you to stop defending yourselves and just listen." The session lasted 2 hours and it was brutal. My parents vacillated between defensiveness and performative remorse. My father insisted they treated both children equally. My mother kept saying she didn't know I felt that way, even though I'd told her repeatedly. Dr. Moore pushed them to take accountability, to move past justifications, but they struggled. At one point, my father said, "This is all because of that documentary. You've turned our private family matters into public entertainment." I looked at him and I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just clarity. "I made that documentary because you refused to see me privately. Because every time I tried to talk to you, you dismissed me. So yes, I went public. And I'm not sorry. The world needed to hear those stories. I needed to tell them. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine." Near the end of the session, Dr. Moore asked what we each hoped for moving forward. My father said he hoped we could put this behind us and rebuild. My mother said she wanted a relationship with me, that she missed me. When it was my turn, I said, "I don't know if I want a relationship with you. I don't know if I trust you to do better. But I'm willing to leave the door open if you're willing to do the work. Real work. Therapy. Accountability. Changed behavior over time. Not just words. Actions." My mother nodded eagerly. "We'll do that. We will." I held up a hand. "Don't promise me right now. Show me over the next year. Show me that you can respect my boundaries, that you can listen without getting defensive, that you can acknowledge harm without making it about your intentions. And if you can do that consistently, then maybe we can try." We left the session and I felt wrung out but not broken. Lucas drove us home, and we sat in the driveway for a long time, not talking, just being. "Did I do the right thing?" I asked him eventually. He turned to look at me. "Do you feel like you did?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, think I do." "Then you did," he said. "And whatever happens next, you'll handle it." The holidays came, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about not spending them with my family. Lucas and I hosted Sophie and a few other friends for Thanksgiving. We cooked too much food, played board games, laughed until our stomachs hurt. It was simple and perfect, the kind of holiday I'd always wanted but never had. Christmas was quieter, just Lucas and me. We woke up late, made cinnamon rolls, exchanged thoughtful gifts. He gave me a set of professional-grade watercolors I'd been eyeing for months. I gave him a painting I'd made of the moment we met, 2 figures at a table, one reaching toward the other, string lights glowing overhead. He cried when he unwrapped it, and I cried watching him cry. and we spent the rest of the day wrapped in blankets, grateful for the life we'd built together. In January, my parents sent a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. It came in a cream envelope, and I stared at it for a full day before opening it. Inside, my mother had written 3 pages. She talked about starting therapy, about the things she was learning about her own childhood, about patterns she hadn't recognized. She apologized again. More specifically this time, naming moments she'd dismissed my feelings, times she prioritized appearance over connection. She said she understood if I couldn't forgive her, but she wanted me to know she was trying. My father's letter was shorter, stiffer, but present. He acknowledged that he'd favored Derek, that he'd equated success with worth, that he'd failed me. He said he was working on it, that he hoped time would allow for healing. I read both letters twice, then put them in a drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, and I didn't have to be. The timeline was mine now. Spring came again, a full year since the documentary premiered, and I found myself thinking about Table 17 less as a wound and more as a catalyst. That moment of sitting alone, of feeling forgotten, had been the beginning of everything that came after. The art, the book, the love, the life. I wouldn't wish that pain on anyone, but I also couldn't regret it. It had carved out space for something new to grow. Lucas and I got married that spring, in our backyard under the oak tree we'd planted together. It was small, just our closest people, vows we'd written ourselves. Sophie was my maid of honor. Derek came with Brittany and Claire, and it was okay. My parents sent a card but didn't ask to attend, which I appreciated. They were learning. Standing there with Lucas, promising forever, I thought about the stranger who'd sat down beside me at a wedding where I didn't belong and made me feel like I did. I thought about how one moment of kindness can change a trajectory, how visibility isn't something you earn but something you deserve, how the best revenge isn't noise but a life so full of joy and purpose that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 31 years old. I'm an artist, a wife, a friend, a woman who was erased and chose to reclaim herself. And if my story has taught me anything, it's this. You don't need everyone to see you. You just need to see yourself. And once you do, once you really do, the right people will find you. They'll sit down beside you. They'll say, act like you're with me. And you'll build something better than you ever imagined possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.